In this tutorial, we will look at what makes a healthy diet. This is an AQA specific tutorial. The first aim is, can you state the 7 components of a healthy diet? Then, can you explain the benefit of each of these components to our body? And then finally, can you use the idea of metabolic rate to explain why dietary needs vary? So it's not uncommon for parents to say, eat your greens, and there's a good reason for that, because we don't need much convincing to eat things like fats, carbohydrates and proteins. And that kind of makes sense if you go back to our evolution. As cavemen, to survive we needed energy. It was a day-to-day fight for survival, and often what we'd hunt would provide us with lots of protein and fats for energy. So we have evolved to find these things very tasty, and sometimes we can neglect other things. But there's a reason why we shouldn't. Basically, cavemen didn't live for very long. And if you want a healthy, long lifespan, then you're going to need to eat more than just fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, because other things are essential to long-term health. Firstly, what is food? Food is a source of energy, but we must intake the right amount for our needs. If we are very active, we need more food that gives us more energy, and if we're very sedentary, that means inactive, then we need less food that gives us energy. If we don't get the balance right, then it can lead to problems such as malnutrition or weight gain, which can lead to obesity, which has been linked to problems such as coronary heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Look at aim 1. What are the 7 components of a healthy diet? Well, firstly, we have carbohydrates, examples of which are pasta, rice and bread. Then we have fats, which you can obtain from meat and dairy, cheeses and things like that. We have protein, which we can get from meat and dairy, but vegetarians can also get these from beans, pulses, lentils, quinoa, things like that. Fiber, which we can get from brown bread, brown rice, generally foods which begin with br. Vitamins, which we can get from lots of fruit and veg. Minerals as well, or mineral ions, which you also get from specific fruits and veg, and also things like liver. And of course, let's not forget water, which we can get from, as well as water, we can also get from our food, such as fruits have high water content. So those are the 7 components of a healthy diet. Now let's understand the benefit that these components have to our body. Carbohydrates offer the healthiest source of energy. There are 2 types of carbohydrates. We have simple carbohydrates, such as glucose, sugar, and things like that. And we have complex carbohydrates, which you'll find in terms of starch, you'll find in pasta and rice and so on. Complex carbohydrates are healthier for us because they release energy slowly into our system, which keeps us feeling fuller for longer. So there's less chance we'll overconsume and less chance of us getting overweight. Other things like glucose are rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream and rapidly used up, so we get hungry very quickly, and it can lead to overeating. Fats are also a very high source of energy, so much so that we really do need to moderate the amount we eat, because if the fats provide so much energy, we often aren't active enough to utilize that energy. So excess fat is often stored as subcutaneous fat underneath our skin, and it does provide insulation, but too much buildup can be very unhealthy and lead to a whole host of health problems. Fats are also an important constituent of our cell membranes, so we do need fats in our diet, but they're a healthier source of fat, such as flax seeds, for example, but we need to moderate the amount we eat. Proteins are essential for growth and repair of damaged tissues, and also for cell replacement. If you're, for example, a bodybuilder or you're an athlete and you want to develop muscle, you will have to eat a high protein diet. Fiber is an interesting thing because we can't actually digest it, so why is it important? When we consume fiber, it actually adds bulk to the food, so it gives something for our gut to push against when it contracts, and that allows food to move through the gut smoothly. Vitamins and minerals I'm just going to lump together as they promote general health in our body. So general health maintenance. I mean, you'd have to go into the specific vitamins and minerals to understand what they each do. Water is essential for transport. 90% of our blood is in fact water, and it's very important for transporting dissolved minerals, dissolved substances such as glucose and amino acids around the body. So water is incredibly important, and you just, if you want to understand that, just remember next time you're thirsty how powerful that sensation is, and that's our body craving water to keep us alive. So hopefully now you can explain the benefit of each component to our body. Now we're going to look at the idea of metabolic rate. So the energy we get from food is needed to fuel your metabolism. Perhaps you've heard this word, but a lot of people don't really understand what it means. So your metabolism refers to the chemical reactions or the chemical processes that keep you alive. The speed at which these processes or chemical reactions occur in your body is referred to as your metabolic rate, and this can also be misused by people in common speak. So let's understand how to use it correctly. We'll address this by looking at the factors that affect your resting metabolic rate. So when you're not active, when you're not exercising, and you're just generally quite chilled out, you'll be experiencing your resting metabolic rate, the energy demands your body has at rest, sometimes also known as your basal metabolic rate. The first important factor is how much of your body is fat and how much of your body is muscle. Muscle has a higher energy demand than fat, so if you have more muscle than fat, it's going to raise your resting metabolic rate. Your body mass also affects your metabolic rate. So here you can see a small hippo and a big hippo. This one will have the higher metabolic rate, quite simply because it has more cells which demand energy, which require energy. So really, if you're very large as a person, you are going to have a very high metabolic rate. And that's why if you start exercising, you'll often lose mass very quickly at first. Next is sex, so whether you're a male or female. Mainly, males generally tend to have more muscle content, and that means they'll have a higher resting metabolic rate. Females generally have less muscle content, but there are always exceptions, plenty of exceptions to that rule. So generally have a lower metabolic rate at rest. Here I've picked a specific picture because the woman's pregnant, and if a female's pregnant, that's going to significantly raise her resting metabolic rate because she's got more cells there due to the developing fetus. Also, depending on how active you are, will also affect your metabolic rate at rest. So if you're a very active person who exercises regularly, you're going to raise your metabolic rate. In fact, after exercise, your metabolic rate is increased and sustained for a short period of time. Also, your job, if you are, for example, a builder lifting heavy materials, then you are going to have a higher metabolic rate. If you are very sedentary, you sit at a desk all day, not very active, looking at computers, then it's going to lower your resting metabolic rate. It's also important to note that genetics play an important role in this as well. So the golden piece of advice here is adjust your diet according to your needs. If you're more active, then you need more carbohydrates, more protein, maybe more fat. If you're less active, then you need to tone it down a bit. So that is how you use the idea of metabolic rate to explain why dietary needs vary from person to person.